There are few things in adult life more irritating than receiving a bill you didn't even know existed, especially when the bill arrives out of nowhere, like it's been hiding in a cave for months waiting to ruin your afternoon. That's exactly what happened to my wife. One Tuesday evening, she walked in from checking the mailbox holding a plain white envelope with the expression of someone who had just been personally insulted by paper. "You ever get a bill from the dentist 8 months later?" she asked. I looked up from the couch. "What?" She handed me the statement. It was from our family dental office. Now, we'd been going there for years. Same hygienist, same waiting room TV permanently stuck on HGTV, same dentist who somehow asked questions while both your cheeks were stretched apart by metal instruments. Normal place. Reliable place. Which made the bill confusing. The statement claimed we owed money from a visit back in late 2024. Not thousands, not even hundreds, just over $80. Still annoying. Mostly because we'd never received any previous invoice. No reminder, no overdue notice, nothing. Just suddenly, pay immediately. And apparently interest had already been added. My wife stared at the paper. Did we forget to pay this? I don't think so. We checked our bank statements. No payment, but also no previous invoice, which felt suspicious. So naturally, I called the dental office the next morning during my lunch break. That was my first mistake. Anyone who has ever called a medical billing department knows the experience feels less like customer service and more like entering a bureaucratic escape room. After 15 minutes on hold listening to smooth jazz that sounded emotionally exhausted, someone finally answered. "Thank you for calling Lakeside Family Dental. This is Karen speaking." I explained the situation, the mystery bill, the missing invoices, the random interest charge. Karen immediately sighed in the way customer service employees do when they've had this exact conversation 37 times already that day. "Oh yes," she said, "we recently transitioned billing systems." That sentence alone explained everything and nothing simultaneously. Apparently, the office had changed accounting software sometime during the previous year. During that transition, several invoices, including ours, had fallen through the cracks. Interesting phrasing, because when my bills fall through cracks, companies usually still expect me to pay them on time. Karen continued explaining that they had recently completed an audit, discovered the missing balances, and reissued updated invoices. With accrued interest, she added casually. That's where my eye twitched. "Wait," I said carefully. "You're charging interest on bills you never sent?" Silence. Then corporate customer service voice activated immediately. "The balance remained unpaid on the account. Because we didn't know it existed. Well, unfortunately, the system still calculates interest automatically." Ah, yes, the system. Humanity's favorite imaginary villain. Not us, not management, not policy. The system. I stayed polite, at first. I explained that I had absolutely no problem paying the actual balance. Fair is fair. If we owed the money, we owed the money. But charging interest on an invoice we never received felt ridiculous. Karen transferred me to billing, naturally. Billing picked up after another 10 minutes of hold music. This time it was a guy named Mark. I repeated the entire story from the beginning because customer service apparently operates on the principle that every department exists in complete isolation from all other departments. Mark confirmed everything Karen said. System transition, missed invoices, recently corrected, interest applied. I tried again. "Can you just remove the interest?" "It's only $5, he replied. Exactly. It was only $5, which meant removing it should have been incredibly easy. That's the part that irritated me most. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about principle. If a company makes a mistake, maybe don't penalize customers for it. Simple concept. Instead, Mark started listing payment options in the same tone people use during airline safety demonstrations. "We can process a card payment over the phone. We also offer payment plans, or you can pay with cash in office." Something about that sentence flipped a switch in my brain. Probably because it sounded rehearsed, like they'd already decided the discussion was over. Meanwhile, I was sitting there being told to pay interest on a bill generated by their own accounting disaster. I took a breath. "Look," I said, "I'm paying the bill. I just think charging interest here is unreasonable." Mark's tone sharpened slightly. "The balance is valid, sir." That was the moment I knew we weren't getting anywhere. Customer service conversations reach a point where both sides stop communicating and start emotionally digging trenches. We had arrived there. So instead of continuing the argument, I simply said, "All right," then hung up. For about 5 minutes, I tried to calm down and move on with my day. That failed immediately, because the more I thought about it, the more annoying it became. Not because of the amount. Again, it was $5. $5 would not financially destroy me. But something about being forced to pay interest for their mistake activated the petty part of my soul, the ancient part, the deeply American customer service warrior part. By the time lunch ended, I had developed a plan. A stupid plan, a totally unnecessary plan, which meant it was perfect. After work, I drove straight to my local bank. The teller at the counter greeted me politely. "What can I help you with today?" I leaned slightly closer like I was about to discuss classified information. "I need to make a withdrawal," I said. "No problem. And I need it in the most inconvenient denominations possible." She blinked. I explained the dentist situation, the missing invoices, the interest, the refusal to remove $5. By the time I finished, the teller was already grinning. "Oh, I hate stuff like that," she said. "Exactly. Validation. Beautiful validation." At first, I suggested $1 bills, then maybe quarters, but the teller suddenly leaned forward with the energy of someone personally invested now. "Do you want rolls of dimes?" she whispered. Reader, it was the most beautiful sentence I had heard all week. Dimes were perfect, heavy enough to be annoying, small enough to require counting, but still technically normal legal currency. Malicious compliance in coin form. The exact balance was $83.21. I withdrew $83 in dimes in pennies, then added a random quarter I found in my truck console. The teller looked genuinely delighted while preparing the stacks of coins. "This is petty," she said. "Yes," I replied proudly. She handed over an absurdly heavy bag of money. I felt like I was transporting pirate treasure or preparing for the world's saddest arcade visit. Driving home, I actually started laughing imagining the dental office counting it. Not because I enjoy making service workers miserable. I don't. Normally, I'd never do something like this. But there's something uniquely satisfying when weaponizing inconvenience against institutions that create inconvenience themselves. If they wanted every cent so badly, they were getting every cent. 1 dime at a time. When I got home, my wife looked at the bag and immediately understood. "Oh no," she said. "Oh yes. You actually did it?" "I absolutely did." She stared for 2 full seconds before bursting into laughter. "You're insane." "Correct." Then I lifted the bag slightly. The coins clinked together with the sound of incoming bad decisions. Tomorrow morning, we were going to the dentist, and somewhere in that office, 2 billing employees were about to have a very long afternoon. The next morning, I woke up feeling surprisingly excited for a man preparing to pay a dental bill. That alone should tell you how committed I was to the bit. Normally, paying bills ranks somewhere between waiting at the DMV and assembling furniture on the list of enjoyable adult activities. But this had purpose. This had drama. This had approximately 8 pounds of dimes. The bag of coins sat on the kitchen counter, looking absurdly heavy for only $83. My wife walked past it holding coffee and shook her head. "You know they're going to hate you." "I know. You're weirdly happy about that." Also correct. She laughed and grabbed her keys. The original plan was for me to go alone, but now she wanted to witness the fallout personally. Honestly, fair. Some moments deserve a live audience. The dental office was only about 15 minutes away. During the drive, the bag kept sliding around on the floorboard, making sounds like a pirate ship crashing into itself. Every clink strengthened my resolve. By the time we pulled into the parking lot, I had fully committed emotionally. No backing out now. Inside, Lakeside Family Dental looked exactly the same as always. Soft instrumental music, fake plants, the faint smell of mint and disinfectant, a television mounted in the corner playing a home renovation show nobody was watching. Normal dental office energy, completely unaware of the incoming coin-based aggression. The receptionist smiled automatically as we walked in. "Good morning." "Morning," I replied pleasantly. I genuinely wasn't angry anymore. That's the funny thing about petty revenge. Once the plan exists, the rage disappears and gets replaced with entertainment. "I'm here to pay a balance," I said. "Of course." She typed for a moment. 83.21? That's the one. Then I lifted the bag onto the counter. Clunk. The receptionist froze. That sound had weight, not metaphorical weight, physical weight, the kind that immediately raises questions. "What's in the bag?" she asked carefully. "Payment." My wife turned away instantly because she was already trying not to laugh. The receptionist slowly opened the bag and stared inside. Dimes. So many dimes. An unreasonable amount of dimes. I watched the exact moment she realized this wasn't an accident. "Oh," she whispered. "Yep." Now, to her credit, she remained professional. Visibly exhausted, but professional. She looked toward the back office. Mark?" Beautiful. Billing guy himself emerged from the hallway carrying a clipboard. The second he saw me, recognition hit. Then he noticed the bag. Then his soul visibly left his body. "What is this?" he asked. $83.21. "In coins? You said cash was acceptable." My wife made a choking sound beside me that suspiciously resembled suppressed laughter. Mark stared at the bag for a long moment. I could practically hear him replaying yesterday's phone call in his head. This was not the follow-up he expected. Technically, I was doing nothing wrong. That's what made it art. Mark forced a smile so strained it looked medically dangerous. "We'll need to count it." "Absolutely," I said cheerfully. And then the counting began. Reader, it was glorious. 2 billing admins joined the effort like they were preparing for an archaeological excavation. They dumped stacks of dimes onto the counter, tiny silver mountains everywhere. The receptionist actually closed the lobby divider slightly, probably to hide the unfolding disaster from other patients. Too late. Everyone noticed. A little kid waiting with his mom stared openly. An older man reading a magazine lowered it slowly, like he was witnessing live theater. One woman whispered, "Oh my God." Exactly. One admin counted aloud while the others stacked coins. 10, 20, 30. The sound of dimes clicking together echoed through the office with incredible passive-aggressive energy. Meanwhile, I stood there completely calm. Honestly, the longer it took, the funnier it became. At one point, Mark looked up and asked, "Did you seriously go to the bank for this?" "Yes." "Why?" I smiled politely. "Because your office charged interest on a bill you never sent me." Silence. One of the admins accidentally snorted laughing, immediately pretended to cough. Mark ignored this betrayal from within his own ranks. They kept counting. 5 minutes passed, then 10. At one point, the dime stacks collapsed and had to be recounted. A masterpiece. My wife was pretending to scroll through her phone, but her shoulders were shaking from silent laughter. The older guy in the waiting room eventually muttered, "Honestly, I respect it." "Thank you, random citizen." Finally, after what felt like an entire geological era, the admins finished. Mark stared at the total sheet, then frowned. "You overpaid." I blinked. Impossible. I had counted the money twice. Then one admin held up the quarter. "You included this." Right. Truck quarter. Forgot about that. Meaning technically I had paid 4 cents too much, and now the universe delivered the perfect final detail. Mark sighed deeply, then opened the register. The admin handed me 4 pennies in change. 4 individual pennies. I accepted them with the seriousness of receiving military honors. "Thank you," I said. The receptionist looked emotionally exhausted. Mark looked like he had aged several years. And I felt incredible. Not because I'd won anything important. I hadn't. The bill was still paid. The office still got their money. Nobody's life changed. But there's a rare kind of satisfaction in forcing a company to experience even a fraction of the inconvenience they casually dump onto customers, especially when they hide behind phrases like, "The system automatically calculates it." Well, guess what? The system just spent 15 minutes counting dimes. As we turned to leave, the little kid in the waiting room looked up to his mother and asked, "Can we pay with coins too?" I nearly collapsed.
The mother immediately answered, "No." Smart woman. Outside in the parking lot, my wife finally lost control, laughing, full, crying laughter. "You are such a petty man," she wheezed. "I know. They're going to remember you forever." Good. We got into the car. For a moment, I thought the story was over. Bill paid, point made, petty revenge completed successfully. Then my phone rang. Caller ID, Lakeside Family Dental. My wife saw the screen and started laughing all over again. "No way!" "Oh, there's absolutely a way." I answered calmly. "Hello?" It was Mark, and somehow he sounded even more tired than before. "Sir," he said carefully, "I just wanted to let you know we've reviewed the account. Interesting, very interesting. And?" There was a pause. Then, "The office has decided to waive the interest charge after all." I stared through the windshield silently. My wife's jaw dropped. "Reader, I almost ascended spiritually." "You mean the $5?" I asked. "Yes, the $5 I asked about yesterday?" "Yes, the $5 you said couldn't be removed?" Long pause. "It has been adjusted." I closed my eyes, not from anger, from victory, pure, petty victory. The best part? They now owed me money, $4.96. Mark continued carefully. "We can apply the credit to future visits." "Absolutely not." "No," I said immediately. "I'd prefer a refund." My wife slapped the dashboard, laughing. Another pause. I could hear Mark reconsidering every career decision that had led to this moment. "We can mail a check." Perfect. Absolutely perfect. A company that refused to remove $5 was now going to spend significantly more than $5 processing and mailing me a refund check. Administrative karma. Beautiful. "Sounds good," I said pleasantly. Then I hung up. For a few seconds, neither my wife nor I spoke. Then, simultaneously, "Oh my God!" We laughed the entire drive home. And sure enough, about 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived from Lakeside Family Dental. Inside was an official refund check for $4.96. I framed it, not because of the money, because of the principle. Some people keep trophies, some people keep medals. I kept proof that weaponized dimes defeated corporate stubbornness, and honestly, worth every penny.
Most people would consider the story finished after the refund check arrived. Reasonable people would deposit the check, laugh about the experience once or twice, and move on with their lives. Unfortunately for everyone involved, I am apparently not a reasonable person, because the second I held that refund check in my hand, a new thought entered my brain. A terrible thought. A thought so petty it should probably qualify as a personality defect. The check was for $4.96. And depositing it would cost the dental office more money in processing fees, postage, accounting adjustments, and administrative work than the refund itself, meaning every possible outcome was annoying for them, which made me unbelievably happy. My wife watched me staring at the check suspiciously. "No," she said immediately, "I haven't said anything. You have the face." "What face?" "The face you make right before becoming difficult." That was deeply unfair. Also accurate. I flipped the check over thoughtfully. "I wonder how much it costs them to process this." She pointed at me dramatically. "Stop. I'm just curious. That's never true." The logical thing would have been mobile deposit. 5 seconds, done. But logic had left this story a long time ago. Instead, I placed the check carefully on the fridge using a magnet shaped like a taco, a trophy, a monument to unnecessary persistence. For the next couple weeks, I forgot about it entirely. Life moved on, work got busy, my wife had another dentist appointment scheduled, the world kept turning. Then one afternoon, she came home trying not to laugh. "I have news." Dangerous sentence. What happened? Apparently, during her cleaning appointment, one of the hygienists casually asked, "So, did your husband ever cash that refund check?" Reader, I have never felt more legendary in my life. My wife nodded slowly while telling me the story. "She said the billing office keeps asking."
I stared in awe. You're telling me they're actively thinking about the check? Yes, in meetings? I don't know about meetings. Oh, there are meetings. At this point, the refund check became psychological warfare, because here's the thing about uncashed checks. They linger. They haunt accounting departments. Every month, some poor employee probably had to look at a spreadsheet showing an unresolved balance of $4.96. Somewhere in the office, my name existed as a tiny administrative curse: outstanding refund, pending deposit. The longer I waited, the funnier it became. My wife disagreed strongly. You need to let this go. Counterpoint, absolutely not. You already won. I can win harder. She stared at me for several seconds. That sentence is why you're like this. Fair. A month later, I finally decided to deposit the check. Not because I felt bad, mostly because I worried the office might eventually void it and escape the accounting inconvenience. Can't allow that. So during my lunch break, I stopped by my bank. The same teller from the dime incident was working again. The second she saw me, she grinned. Oh no. Oh yes. I handed her the check. She looked at the amount, then immediately started laughing. They refunded you? They refunded the interest. This is the funniest customer dispute I've ever seen. Validation once again. Beautiful. I explained the entire follow-up situation: the mailed refund, the accounting limbo, the hygienist asking about the check. By the end, the teller was wiping tears from her eyes. You know, somewhere in that office they hate you. Honestly, that's enough for me. She processed the deposit while still laughing. Then she paused. You know what would be really evil? I leaned forward instinctively. What? You could request the refund in coins. Reader, for one brief shining moment, I considered it. Then even I realized there had to be limits. No, I said finally. I've done enough damage. Growth. Personal growth. Very rare. A few weeks after depositing the check, my wife had another appointment. This time I drove her because we were heading somewhere afterward. I stayed in the waiting room scrolling on my phone while she went back for her cleaning. And then it happened. Mark appeared. Billing guy himself. He spotted me instantly. We locked eyes across the lobby like two veterans meeting after a long war. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, he walked over. You cashed the check, he said. Not angry, not annoyed, just tired. Deeply tired. I did. He nodded once like a man accepting fate. Well, good. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, he started laughing. Not fake customer service laughter, real laughter. You know, he said quietly, people in the office still talk about the dimes. I felt weirdly proud. One of the admins threatened to quit that day. That seems dramatic. She had to recount everything twice. Skill issue. Mark laughed harder, and suddenly the entire situation became strangely human, because up until then, the dental office had existed in my mind as the enemy. Not people, just the system. But standing there talking to Mark, I realized something important. The actual billing employees probably hated the situation too. They didn't create the policy, they didn't break the billing software, they were just trapped dealing with angry customers afterward. That didn't make the interest charge less stupid, it did soften things slightly. Slightly. Mark leaned against the counter. Between you and me, he admitted quietly, we told management waiving the interest originally would have been easier. I blinked. You did? Yep. And they said policy was policy. Ah, yes, the ancient corporate tradition of creating enormous problems to protect tiny amounts of money. Classic. I shook my head. All this over $5. Technically $4.96. Fair point. At that moment, the receptionist from the dime day walked past. She noticed me and immediately pointed. Oh my God, coin guy. Coin guy. Not even offended. Honestly, incredible nickname. Before I could respond, another employee poked her head out from the hallway. Wait, that's him? This had become office lore. I was folklore now, a cautionary tale told during billing meetings, respectfully terrifying. The receptionist laughed. "You have no idea how long we counted those stupid dimes." "I counted them too," I defended, "not emotionally." Fair again. By the time my wife returned from her cleaning appointment, 3 separate employees had wandered over to hear the story firsthand. Not hostile, just entertained. Apparently, the entire office had eventually turned the incident into a running joke. One employee even said, "Honestly, management deserved it." Unexpected ally. As we prepared to leave, Mark shook his head, smiling. "You know what the worst part was?" "What?" "The bank charged us a coin processing fee." Reader, I nearly blacked out from happiness. Not because I wanted them punished, okay, maybe a little, but because the universe had delivered the most mathematically perfect ending imaginable. Their refusal to waive $5 had literally cost them more money. Actual measurable loss. Not emotionally, financially. I placed my hand over my heart dramatically. "That's beautiful." Mark pointed at me. "See, that right there is why you're dangerous." My wife immediately jumped in. "Thank you." Finally, after months of petty nonsense, everybody involved had reached the same conclusion. This entire situation was unbelievably stupid. And somehow, that made it perfect. As we walked toward the parking lot, my wife slipped her hand into mine and laughed softly. "You know, most couples make memories through vacations or romantic dinners. We made ours through weaponized currency. You carried $83 in dimes into a medical office out of spite." "Correct." She shook her head, smiling. "I cannot believe you married me." But she was still laughing, which means deep down, she absolutely approved. And honestly, if a company ever charges you interest on a bill they forgot to send, sometimes exact change is the only language they understand.